Sunday night, 5 o'clock. Where are you at? You're right here at A Valid Answer with Scott and Marshall, a pastor and an atheist. Discuss all kinds of things from religion to politics, economics, all those things that we are just infinitely, prepared and trained to discuss. You felt that sarcasm, right? Marshall, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. How about you?
Excellent. I'm doing great. Just a great day. We had just a little bit of a plug for a future episode yesterday.
Yeah.
Yesterday, we shot a future episode because in a few weeks, Marshall's going to be out of town doing Kriegspiel.
Yeah. It's a military
it's
training.
A military
exercise.
training. It's really fascinating, but I think it's a little too detailed for me. I don't know if I can handle that.
I think you could.
He's going to be out of town, so what are we going to do for our show? So we went yesterday to Five Dogs shooting range, and I took Marshall to shoot.
I didn't see any dogs. I was really disappointed.
He was aiming for the dogs. Let me tell you, he wanted to hit some dogs. No.
I love dogs.
but
I want to pet them, take them home.
But he did. Basically, it was your first time at a shooting range that we did that yesterday. So
I had been to an indoor shooting range once as a young man.
Oh, okay.
As a teenager, in fact. But yeah, I haven't been to a shooting range in probably 25 years. And it was the first time I handled any of those weapons, except maybe the Glock, the pistol.
Okay, so you fired one of those.
Something very similar to that.
But you actually got to fire a 106-year-old pistol?
In 1911.
1911.
It was a treat.
That was actually built in 1912, as I come to find out, and I didn't know it was that old until a few years ago. So, so we shot all that. We recorded our podcast talking about guns and firearms and gun laws and all that kind of stuff. So that's going to be coming up.
All the way home.
Big debate all the way home. Basically recorded. We had a camera and everything set up in our car on the way home and did our show on the way home. And so it's going to be a really cool episode coming up. Do we want to say the date? Yeah.
I think it's August 31st.
Or September
1st. I'm not sure, but it's right around there.
Once we get a firm date on when that is, it's going to be right there. So it's going to be a Sunday in just a few weeks, and it's going to have that. But today we're talking about our origin stories, because every superhero has an origin story. So we wanted to share our origin stories and of how we got here, how we got to be where we're at. How is it that I ended up being a pastor? That is not what I went to school for. That is not where I thought I was going. How did you end up being an atheist from where you started with your family and stuff like that? So us superheroes, we wanted to share our origin stories with you. And in the Christian world, they would call that a testimony. I want to share my testimony, but I wanted to keep the language not so churchy. So we're doing our origin stories. Origin stories. So today, that's what we're talking about. So chime in. We've got you right here on the iPad. If you guys have questions for us, you want to know, any more detail about what we're saying, absolutely send those questions over, and we'll try to start with that. So I would like to see if maybe you want to share first. You want me to share first?
I'd kind of like to hear your story first, because mine is going to be the one that a few people have heard.
Gotcha.
But Christian testimonies, most people have heard one or two of those.
Yeah.
But I'm still very interested in yours. I believe you were probably born Christian and raised Christian.
Well, I was born
that doesn't make you a pastor.
No.
You're very committed to your faith, I can tell.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And that's a high compliment.
Thank you.
And I'm deeply interested in hearing why is that so?
Okay, well, I'm going to make a short story long. I was born at a very young age.
Natural pastor.
Natural pastor, make a short story long. No, I was actually not literally born into a Christian family. My dad grew up Catholic, was married in a Catholic church to my mom.
That's Christian.
But hold on, I'm getting to that.
Okay.
So, my sister was born with cerebral palsy, and my dad had a very difficult time with that. And by the time I was born, he was you cannot talk about religion in the home. You cannot talk about God. You don't talk about politics. It was very much a non-faith-based home when I was born. And then my uncle, my dad's brother, had found Christ and witnessed to my dad because he knew the rules in the house. So he literally threw the Bible at my dad and said, and my dad chased him out of the yard, and my dad basically grabbed that Bible and says, they're just trying to rip him off. They're just, I'm going to go. And he went into actually what's at the time my brother's in my bedroom and said, I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to show him where it's all messed up. And a few hours later, he came out crying, knowing Jesus from just reading the Bible on his own.
Yeah. Well, what did he ever tell you what he read? That
I don't know.
Had such an
I don't
impact?
know. I don't know that it was necessarily the words that was read, but something that God did with his life. I was 4 years old at the time, and my dad did everything 120%. When he went into something, he went into it. And at the age of 4, my household that I grew up in was suddenly we're going to follow God and do what God says. And we found a local church that was actually in Oildale. We lived over by Virginia Avenue School, and we found a church in Oildale. We were there for many years. And then when I was 8, we went to a church at the time called Outreach for Christ, which eventually renamed itself to Valley Bible Fellowship, and that's where I attended church for 30 years. So so when I was born, I wasn't necessarily born into a Christian household, but my dad found God when I was a very young child. So I basically grew up in a Bible, God-believing house. And because my dad really got into following Christ in a deep way, he whatever he did, like I said, he did it 120%. It's like, well, I'm gonna do what it says. I'm gonna follow what it says, and found a very spiritual connection. Became just this amazing. Most people called him a prophet because, and he never said, he never called himself a prophet. Most people called him a prophet. But you would think that he knew everything that was going on in everybody's lives. You would think that he knew all this stuff, and the way he described it to us, he described it to me when I was, actually I was already I think I might've been married by the time he came up with this analogy to say, this is basically what it happens. He says, I really believe, my dad said, I just listen. Most people can hear God, but most people don't have the courage to just do it. Like, it sounds crazy. Why would I do that? Why would I, I'm sitting here in church and all of a sudden I just get this feeling that I'm supposed to walk 5 rows back and hand money to this person. Okay, how much money do I have? And most of us sometimes we'll hear that, but we'll be like, I don't know if that's really God. Is that just my thinking? Is that just what? And yeah,
5 rows. Okay.
I'm just giving an example, but I'm saying
I'm coming to church next Sunday.
Yeah, he would just, oh, is that what I'm supposed to do? Okay, then and the way he described it as, he said, I just figured out, like, I'm running a hot dog stand. I'm just running this hot dog stand, and okay, and then God will just be like, hey, make a hot dog with this, and this on it. I don't know why. Okay, and somebody will walk up and say, hey, I'd like to order it, and he would just hand it. They'd be like, that's exactly what I wanted. How did you know what I needed? How did you know what's going on in my life? And my dad's like, I don't know what's going on in your life. I'm not saying, oh, let me go find out and prophesy over this person. It was simply God said, do this, do that, and that it was exactly what the person needed. Hey, here's the scripture. Go tell this person that they need to do, go tell this person this scripture. Go tell this person this phrase. And it's like, okay, I'll just go do that. It was just a very simple, and I watched him and heard all these stories, so many stories from so many people who were touched by his life, because out of the blue, he would just come and just say, God told me to tell you this, and walk off. And that's just, and people would say, how did he know? He must be a prophet. He must hear God. People would literally say, and it's almost funny. He would come up. He would be walking towards him, and they were thinking, "What has God told him about my life? What is he gonna?" They would, and he would tell us, he's like, it's not like God saying that person over there, you're gonna find out that. It was just simply, hey, say this to this person. That's all you have to do, and that's what he did. And I saw that lived out all the time, my whole life growing up, and hearing all these stories of people whose lives were affected by my dad simply being obedient to what he felt he heard from God. So I just grew up knowing and seeing there is a God who speaks to me, and if I follow what he's doing, I can have an effect on people. And not I can have an effect, but I can be the conduit through which God does something, because the Bible says, we're his hands, we're his feet to the world. I'm supposed to be the light that shines. I'm supposed to be the salt of the earth. That's what I'm supposed to be. If I'm following God, I should be shining a light in such a way that the people around me see what I am doing and glorify God because of it. That's literally the Matthew 5 scripture, is what it's talking about. The city on a hill, the salt of the earth, the light of the world, all that is what it's talking about. It's saying people should see you. You should bring flavor to what's going on around. You should bring light. You should be this, that everybody looks and sees and says, I can't deny that what you're doing, there's something special about what you're doing. And so I grew up in church. I grew up in a Christian household, and I grew up just knowing and seeing there is a God who individually cares about us. And I've seen the stories. I've lived out, been part of those stories, been part of people saying, you came around with your dad, and that's, you were always praying with me. And I remember, Monica Meadows, if you're out there, I remember always going to the store to get a sandwich at the old Outpost store on Oswell and Edison. And we were there because my dad said, keep talking to this person. Eventually she found Christ. And it just, I was part of so many stories. I experienced so much. I couldn't deny it, but I still needed my own. I can't live off of my dad's walk with God. I can't live off of my dad's belief. And I had to decide for myself. And I was actually in high school, getting ready to go into my senior year of, what am I going to do with my life? Where am I going to go? As I was, it was a very simple little, it's silly when you think about it now, but it's like I had an opportunity to take 2 different classes, but I had to choose which one. Those seniors, my son is going to a senior year right now and having to choose, which class you're going to take and stuff like that. And I'd been in band since 5th grade, and band was at a certain period at Foothill, and I was going to try to take my dad's graphic arts class, which was at the ROP, and it was a 3-hour class. So I could, if I was going to take that, I only had enough room to take the requirements for to graduate.
One or the other.
Yeah, so it was one or the other because they happened at the same time. Not necessarily the same time, but I only had 3 periods to work with, and I had 3 things that I had to do in order to graduate, and then I could use the rest of it for the graphic arts program. And I had to decide, what am I going to do? Am I going to be, first chair soloist with the marching horn for marching band, or take the graphic design class, which one's going to be a better decision for me? Which one's going to be, and my dad just basically said, it's you have to decide it, but this is the decision you need to pray about. This is a decision that you need to establish your own walk with God and make your decision, and know that this was you talking with God to know what you're going to do, because this is going to affect, and it literally by so many ways affected me to get me to where I'm going, get me to where I ended up, at least right now. I'm discovering at 43 that where I'm at now is not exactly where I'm going. I used to think, well, once you're 40, that's it. That's the end of the road. That's where you are. In prayer, I felt that I was supposed to, that God wanted me to take the graphic design class. In the graphic design class, I ended up, because I wanted to be an architect. I wasn't aiming to be a graphic designer. When I was a senior in high school, I was taking a drafting class, and my first semester at BC, I was taking a AutoCAD class because I wanted to be an architect. I wanted to be an automotive designer, but I didn't think I was going to make. But I was really liked houses, and I wanted to design houses. So I wasn't even thinking like graphic design or the ministry or seminary. It was just like, okay, but I think I'm supposed to take this class. Not sure why, but I think I'm supposed to take this class. Ultimately, through that class, I got my job at a print shop. Ultimately got to use my talents as a graphic artist, discovered that architecture was not for me, because it's really not just about drawing houses. It's about understanding engineering. And that was like, no, that was way too much detail for me. And I'm like, I don't think I'll do that. But now I could be an artist. I could be a graphic artist. People will actually pay me to do art. When I was a kid, people would pay me candy to draw them pictures of Garfield. When I was like in 4th grade and 5th grade and stuff like that. So, and I'm like, people will pay me to be an artist. And I eventually started my own graphic design company, which I found out for about a year that I'm not a businessman in any way. I don't know how to make money because I just don't know how to charge people for what I do. But because I took that step, I started volunteering at church with a high school group, and eventually started volunteering in the junior high ministry, and eventually got asked to be the junior high leader because I was just there. I'd lived this life of knowing God. I'd never walked away from the path of God. I never, wandered. And I had this background, a pretty solid spiritual background, that they said, we trust you to lead these students. And I began teaching junior high, became the junior high pastor, thought I was going to be an architect, and it came all the way around. Maybe I'm going to be a graphic artist, and eventually became a junior high pastor. And then it came full circle again in that the church needed a graphic artist and a video maker. And then so they got somebody else to be the junior high pastor. And then I made church videos and did church production, everything like that until, and I've shared this story with you before, until God told me 5 years ago that it was time for something new. And I had to walk away from this church that I'd been for 30 years, from a job that I'd been working for 15 years. And God said, I have something new for you. And I quit the job right in the middle of, it was on the back, it was on the, maybe it was on the rebound, but it was 2013. So it wasn't like in the middle of the recession, but it was still not a time to be quitting a career. Yeah. But I knew that's what God said. It was confirmed in my life, and I knew that God speaks. I grew up knowing that, and I know that God speaks, and I know that God speaks to me, and I followed it, came here to New Life Church, been here for 5 years, and I've experienced growth personally and spiritually here in the last 5 years that I've never personally experienced before this, and some healing and some growth that needed to happen in my life that I think couldn't happen where I was before, because that's where I grew up. That was almost my childhood, and that was something that I think God said you have to detach from, because everybody there knew me as Charlie Garcia's son, and come to a place where nobody knew me, and then and experience some healing there that I had not experienced before. But I remember being a teenager, and we would have the testimony nights. Everybody come up and share their testimony. I remember hearing people sharing about how, so many people, how, and I've mentioned this before, the transforming power of the gospel, and seeing that, being in church for 30 years and watching people tell their stories of how they were lost, how they were just, deep into drugs and all this kind of stuff. And then God reached down into the gutter and pulled them out and made them a new person. And I remember kind of as a teenager thinking, wow, that was a good testimony. Wow, that was another good testimony. How come I don't have a good testimony like that? Like, I remember thinking as a teenager, I don't have a testimony. Gosh, man, that one sounded like fun. How come I couldn't have a testimony like that? They were stealing cars and had all this money and doing all this stuff. And, and then they went to prison. Oh, I don't want that part. But, maybe I could have a little bit of that fun, and then I'll have a testimony. And then discovering that I was actually living, two things. I thought of myself too highly, because I was thinking, well, I didn't need God like they needed God. Mm-hmm. Not realizing, yes, everybody needs God. I had to come to a point where I realized I needed God. I grew up, because I grew up so much in church, I kind of developed this, well, I didn't make those mistakes. I don't, and mm-hmm. there was a pride that God had to deal with me on that. But at the same time, the testimony that I did have was the testimony of being, especially teaching young people to be able to say, here I am standing in this position, telling you, if you don't that person made those mistakes, found the healing power of God and has come around. There's still a lot of baggage. There's still a lot of things that there's a lot of pain and everything that they still have to deal with. And yes, they found Christ and they have they're a completely new person now and all these things. But there's all this stuff in tow. I can stand here and tell you that it is possible to not have to make those mistakes and not have to live those lives and still live a life of joy and peace and fulfillment, and realize that I did actually have a testimony, even though as a teenager I kept thinking, I don't have a testimony. Why couldn't I have that testimony? That sounds like a good testimony. But so that's in a nutshell. We'll probably get back and forth and can get into more details if we want to, but that is essentially, I grew up knowing in my heart that there was a God, that he spoke to us personally, and that he affected our lives, because I just saw it everywhere around me. And when it came time for me to be the person who surrenders himself to God to affect others, I stepped into that. I stepped into, it was actually, okay, I'll tell you a little bit more of the story, because it was honestly, I've shared this story actually just recently, but it started, my ministry as a junior high pastor started because there was a girl that I liked in the college group. Classic, right? The classic origin story starts with the girl. Now, this is not the girl that I ended up marrying. It's not my wife. I had not met my wife, and who was going to be my wife at the time. But there was this girl that I saw her car at the church on a Tuesday night. I'm like, why is her car there? Oh, that's right. She does that drama class with the high school kids. And so I came by and said, hey, how's it going? They said, hey, we're doing it, but this is our last time we can do it because the neighborhood that the church is in is kind of shady, and it was just her and another girl leading it. And they said they didn't want us meeting at night at the church without a guy there to help them out. I'm like, okay, I'll be the guy. And so then I've never in drama and she was in drama in high school and all this kind of stuff. I was never in drama, but I'm like, I can act. I can act up. So I know how to act up. So maybe I can act. And got to know these high school kids in this ministry. We went and would practice and go on Wednesday night to the junior high ministry. And the junior high room was just this wild, crazy, noisy. And I'm like, well, okay, we'll do our thing and then we're going to go. And I was actually asked by the junior high pastor at that time, hey, do you want to help out in junior high ministry too? I'm all, no, I'm good. I'll help with the high schoolers and we'll do that. And then some really bad things happened at the church. Our junior high pastor at the time fell into sin, and there was a big old thing that was in the news, and it all got messed up. And my college pastor had to help take over that. So I would go in with this skit team, and then I'm like, I'm going to stick around and help my friend Pastor Jim. Jim Cruz help him with these junior hires because he's going to need some help, right? And the coolest thing happened is that when I was there, it was suddenly not a room full of crazy junior hires. It was Michael and Christy and it was suddenly I got to know their names. It was Louie and and I'm like Tyler, and suddenly there were these people that I realized I could share my life with. I could share my story with. I could and I stuck around for a little less than a year. I stuck around until somebody else came in and kind of took over, and then it didn't work out, and then somebody else kind of came in, took over, didn't work out, and I just kept working with them, with the kids, and then finally they just looked and said, well, you're here consistently. Do you want this job? We trust you with them, and we know your history and your past and your father, and I'm like, I do. Like, this is now what I want to do. So I was 23 years old and wanted to be a junior high pastor for the rest of my life. And it didn't work out that way, but that's basically what happened. It was just all those stepping stones, and I can trace it back to the decision I made that day when my dad asked me to make my own decision. So that's a little bit more detail, but I wanted to share that. It just reminded me because I actually just got a Facebook post from that girl. Her name was Lisa. Lisa, if you're watching, hi, how's it going? You know this story. But she came across a picture of, I'll pull it up right here. I don't know if anybody, no, you guys won't be able to see it, but a picture of all of us together in that group. You see me?
Oh wow!
Yeah, that's before I even had a goatee, before I had anything. And that was the whole group, and it was a traumatic thing that in the middle of that group, one of these people, that guy right there, actually committed suicide. Close after this, and we all kind of dealt with that at the school and the church and stuff like that. But that little group, it kind of, we bonded together and stuff like that. So just a lot of spiritual things going on at the time. I'll see if I can maybe post that picture, or if you're following him on Facebook, I actually just posted it a little bit earlier today. But yeah, it was about, if I could boil my testimony down to something very simple, it was, I grew up experiencing the reality of God, and then I chose that for myself.
Okay.
All right. Hopefully that's a valid answer.
No, I think that's just fine. That's a pretty cool testimony. You have a cool testimony.
Yay! I have a cool testimony.
So says the atheist. Well, my origin story, I don't know if it's necessarily as cool or as interesting. But I'll give everyone sort of the thumbnail version of it. I was born an atheist because we were all born without a particular religion or a faith. I was raised as a Catholic, baptized as a baby, raised as a Catholic.
Okay.
And probably from the time I was, as far back as I can remember, I've always enjoyed and had a particular affinity for the Catholic faith. And I became a very strong believer by the time I was a teenager.
That's when I met you.
Mm-hmm. And I think by the time I was in college, if you had asked me my religious affiliation, I wouldn't have said merely Catholic. I actually told people I'm militant Catholic. I was of the belief that the entire world should be subservient to the Pope in Rome. And I was actually fairly anti-Protestant. I was that Catholic.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, the great enemy wasn't, the atheists. I don't even know if I even knew atheists back then. The enemy was the Protestants and the generic Christians, and the ones who were particularly anti-Catholic
Yep.
were particularly loathsome to me. And I went through a lot of debates and arguments. I joined the InterVarsity Club at college, and most of those people were Protestants.
Yeah.
And so there was some headbutting that went on, but it was also relatively friendly and cordial.
Yeah.
I got to know a lot of Mormons. There was a Mormon Institute across from the campus.
Yep.
And I got to know several Mormons. I would actually go hang out over there from time to time. And so by the time I was married and had my first kid, I was about 25 years old. I was very committed to the Catholic faith. I went to church every Sunday. I was very active at the church. Did a lot of activities. It was pretty much involved everywhere. I was almost synonymous with the church. A lot of people, saw me and associated me with the church because I was a big part of the life there.
Yeah.
And then around age 25, something happened that put me into a tailspin. Now, what happened was a health problem, and it began as early as when I was 21, but I didn't know what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
But I would drink something, and 15, 20 minutes later, I would have a sharp pain in my body, in my down below my tummy, and what it was kidney stones.
Mm.
And when I was 25, I had a particularly horrible episode where I was in constant pain for over 72 hours.
Wow.
I ended up needing surgery. I had to go in and
Like
have
emergency surgery immediately?
I can't remember. One of the times I went in, yes, it was
Wow.
an emergency situation because the stone was too big to pass naturally. Yeah. My kidney was becoming swollen. The flow of fluid was blocked.
Yeah.
And so it was very concerning to the doctor. And I've actually had that happen to me twice.
Wow.
And as I writhed around on the floor of my bedroom, I thought to myself, why is God letting this happen to me of all people? Here I am. I am a faithful Christian, go to church militantly every Sunday. Mm-hmm. I mean, it could be 7:30 at night, and I am racing to church to attend Mass before the Sunday is over. You just don't miss, And here I am suffering in the most unimaginable pain. And in my mind, I could not process that.
Yeah.
It felt to me like I was being stabbed with a knife, in the groin or in the back. Mm-hmm. Like I felt like I had a knife inside my body.
Wow.
So, and the pain didn't go away. Even you could take a painkiller like the doctor prescribed, like Vicodin. Yeah. And I would take one of those, and it kind of sort of took the edge off, but it certainly didn't make the pain go away. It was very hard to sleep. It was just brutal. Yeah. So, what that made me do was doubt God. It made me kind of start along this path of investigation, asking questions. Yeah. Well, if God isn't answering my prayer of all people, and I could tell you right there, that's hubris, it's pride, right? Mm-hmm. I should have read...
of all people.
Right, I should have read the book of Jonah or Job, something like that, right? Yeah. But for whatever reason, that inspiration did not come to me until much, much later. Yeah. And I began to look into other religious practices, other religions. I looked into Buddhism, and I found a lot of things in Buddhism that I really liked. Like, wow, here is this entire treasure trove of wisdom from the East, and it makes a heck of a lot of sense. But it wasn't just Buddhism. I looked at other things. I looked at other Christian religions. I looked at a variety of religious philosophies. At one point, I was like, well, what is this? What is Satanism about? What is Wicca about? What is paganism about? What are all of these different things about? Mm-hmm. And what I began to notice is there's a lot of commonalities between all of these religions. A lot of them make the same arguments for the existence of their deity. Yep. They all draw upon the same evidence. They all tell you to pray about it and to think about it. They all have holy writings that, by and large, are relatively similar. They're probably more similar than dissimilar, to me at least. Mm-hmm. I kind of came to this conclusion, like they all sort of have found some kind of truth, but they're not exactly right. Mm-hmm. And then I discovered logic, and I've always been a fan of science.
Yeah.
And I delved a lot more into logic, and I began to read.
You were in debate. You were in debate when in high school, so that was already something that was there.
The seed was there, but even in high school, I didn't have proper formal coaching until college. And even in college, nobody really went through all of the logical exercises with me, saying, here's all of the fallacies and so on. And I had to really teach myself a lot of these things later as a full-grown adult. And I acquired a lot of this knowledge and information while I was on my, if you will, spiritual journey.
Yeah.
And what I eventually concluded was that everybody's wrong. There ain't no evidence out there whatsoever for the existence of any kind of a deity, of any kind. Not God, there's no Buddha, there's no Allah, there's no Satan, there's no spirits of the forest or any of that stuff. It's
all the colors of the wind.
Right, So what religion is, and, in my understanding, is it's a way that people make sense of the world around them, and it's a way of kind of having some sort of control or influence. And it answers a lot of questions, and it satisfies curiosities, it satisfies doubts. It gives people a sense of purpose and direction. It's very useful. It's extremely practical. However, I've said this before, a lie is a lie, no matter how sweet it is. And atheism, I have to tell you, is very cold and indifferent and impersonal. It's kind of rough because my life went into a complete and absolute tailspin as I became more and more of an atheist, because it didn't just happen all at once. It wasn't like a light bulb's coming on. It wasn't an epiphany. I did not meet, Richard Dawkins on the road to Damascus and suddenly become, I'm an atheist now. It was not like that. It was something that happened gradually over time. And I think the straw that broke the camel's back was, I think it was in 2011 or whatever, when they had the big tsunami in Japan.
Okay.
I had stayed up late that night because I could not go to sleep. So I was on my computer, probably playing a game or goodness what.
Yeah.
And I had kind of become a news bug. I had become kind of addicted, and I'd always been addicted to following the news and politics and what's going on.
Yep.
So right before going to bed, quite inexplicably, maybe it was God, I don't know, I turned on the TV.
Yeah.
And on the TV, I saw a wave on the ocean being filmed by a helicopter. And then I saw this wave sweep up onto land, and the view panned back. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's a tsunami.
Yeah.
And I saw the cars at an intersection in Japan where the people were driving to the intersection, and they would stop and let the other person go, and then they would take their turn. These people were absolutely polite, even though it meant their death, because in a moment later, that wave washed over all of those cars. And I watched hundreds of people lose their lives on TV at about 11 o'clock at night or whatever hour it was. It was the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And I just lost it. I flipped. I'm like, really? God is going to let this happen to people who are frankly good people? They might not be Christians. They might be Christians. There are Christians in Japan.
Yeah.
But a God that would permit this to happen, if it exists, it is incumbent upon us and me to hunt it down and kill it. The anger was through the roof, like Mount Fuji erupting.
Yeah.
Right? So for a few years after that, and you and I had sort of reconnected around that time, I imagine, or shortly after.
Shortly after, yeah.
And I was now a militant atheist instead of a militant Catholic.
Maybe anti-theist.
I was an anti-theist, absolutely. Yeah. And I didn't want to hear what was good about religion or any of that, because to me, religion was a great deception. It was a great evil.
And then you ran into me.
And then I ran into you. And the cool thing about that is you were able to witness to me that conclusion on my part was premature, that it was wrong. And I'm happy to say that it's wrong, and I'm glad, because I don't want to be an anti-theist.
That's just as illogical. when you realize it was just as illogical
yes.
as being a theist.
Yes, it is. And there's good and bad in all things, and that includes in religion and also in atheism. Because as an atheist, I became a raging jerk. And I don't know how many friends and family members.
And we're all waiting for you to get out of that phase.
I pushed away.
Yeah.
And my social media was just off the charts. I mean, even now, I go back to my timeline and it shows you the stuff you posted in the past. I'm like, oh, wow, I'm not going to share that now.
Yeah.
You know? And I participated in the establishment. I actually founded a local atheist group here in town.
You founded that one?
Yes, I did.
I didn't know you founded that.
Yes, I did. Me and one other person, we established it.
Does it still meet and stuff?
It is still active, but I don't think it's super active. It's
Gotcha.
kind of low key. I think it meets very irregularly.
Do you want to invite them, or you want to? You don't want to tell us who it is. It's up to you. Doesn't matter.
Well, I don't want to bring them in. You
Gotcha.
know, they can chime in and
us.
speak for themselves.
Find us at A Valid Answer, Facebook.
Not all atheists are alike. We're not monolithic, just like not all Christians are alike. There's a wide variety. But there is, among atheists, I feel, a commitment and a dedication to seeing and understanding the universe and the world as it truly is.
Mm-hmm.
And the way to discern how things truly are is through rational investigation, through following logic, you know, having this almost dogmatic devotion to logic. And what that means is we're not really going to give a lot of credence to anecdotes to, well, I had this moment or I heard the voice of God or whatever. That's an anecdote. I cannot put that in a test tube and I cannot measure it. I cannot evaluate it. Therefore, it is not scientific. Whereas science, which does have a proven track record of producing knowledge upon which we can build the world, our cell phones, this very podcast is dependent upon scientific discoveries rather than religious discoveries, I think. And
well, the science gives us a way to broadcast it, but without the religion, we'd have nothing to talk about.
Right? Well, there's politics, I reckon. But, you know, the past few years in particular, I think I've matured quite a bit. And I'm not going to say I've arrived, and I'm not going to say that I'm finished with my journey. And I'm not going to say that I will die as an atheist, although I expect to. But I am also open to the possibility that at some point in the future I will see the light, that some evidence could be presented to me. Now, to me, that's an extraordinary claim. And extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So the likelihood of me converting to Christianity or Islam or Buddhism or any other religion is actually pretty low. However, I cannot rule out the possibility that you are correct or that any of these other people are correct.
It makes me think of this line from the movie. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Red Planet. Val Kilmer and a few other people on there. Oh,
gosh, maybe many years ago.
But there was Terrence Stamp played a character who was a scientist who was going through the same thing. And literally this line, I thought it was great. He's like, who knows? Maybe one day I'll come across a rock and turn it over and it'll say, made by God. And Val Kilmer's character is like, that would be a discovery.
But as it turns out, you know, my religious upbringing and my active faith and my formative youth has taught me a lot about religion and faith. And I've been in a lot of debates and arguments.
You have a unique, Marshall here has a unique position in that you are, well, maybe it's actually not that unique, but you are not an uninformed atheist about religion. You are very informed about that. But yeah, so
a lot of atheists know the Bible fairly well. Oftentimes, I think better
more than Christians
than the average Christian does, and in fact, that's why they're atheists. As atheists, or certainly as anti-theists, we will argue that what made us Christian was reading, or what made us atheists was reading the Bible. That there's no greater book conceived for atheism than the Bible itself. And then you get into all of the contradictions and stuff, but then there's apologetics for that, and
mostly it's the people. Mostly the wherever that quote is, I quoted it before here and still can't remember who does it, but the greatest cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who, you know, claim God with their mouth but deny Him by their lifestyle.
And that's consistent with what I've observed, that most people, in my opinion, are functional atheists. Because most of us out there, folks, let's be honest with ourselves, you're living just like I do, you're living just like an atheist. You know, if you're not going to
Let's be
church every
honest.
Sunday, if you're not doing all the things that the Bible tells you should be doing, chances are you're probably living as an atheist, even though you claim to believe. Because I think if I truly believed,
Wanting virtual credit.
right?
What was it? We're watching. Our family was watching Princess Diaries, and there's always these little funny lines. And that virtual homework will not be given credit for. You know, it's like you can't get virtual credit for. You know, if you're living one way but claiming something else, you don't get virtual credit.
Because I think if you believe what's written in this, it impacts your life in a profound
Yes.
way. I understand.
You can see that.
I can see that.
Yep.
And I understand why many Christians will go live in a compound somewhere.
Yep.
They will almost practically remove themselves from society because they truly believe what's in here, and that's the only way they can escape all of the influences and distractions that pull them away from
But
this.
if I did that, I wouldn't be able to help you.
Exactly. So some people have to go out there, and you have to be the yeast that leavens the bread. I totally get that.
Yeah.
But
The
as an
atheist
atheist,
quoting the Bible.
as an atheist, I am committed to following I'm committed to using the tools that I have in my toolbox.
Yep.
And those tools for me are reason and logic and evidence and science, scientific inquiry. Science is a verb, by the way, just so people know. Science is a method of rational inquiry by which we can discern not truths with a capital T, but truths with a small t.
Okay. All right.
We can discern
I'll call those
probabilities, facts,
Yep.
absolutely facts. Theories are simply bundles of facts.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I leave to religion to provide answers with a capital T. But naturally,
But you haven't seen any evidence to do that yet.
I have not seen capital T truth.
Maybe one day you'll turn
Yeah.
over that rock and it'll say "Made by God."
Maybe I will, right? So that's kind of my origin story. I'm still on a journey, man.
Yeah. No, that's awesome.
I'm still searching.
And what I don't want to do is now ask a bunch of questions because I don't want it to be an interrogation. I wanted us just to be
the
able,
lights, actually, the
yeah,
lights are right now.
yeah, the lights are actually shining on us right now. But if you guys have questions, you post your questions
Yeah.
here, and we'd love to be able to discuss those on there and continue this discussion on there and maybe answer those questions. But I don't want this to be a gotcha moment. I don't want this to be like, oh, okay, you said these things, now I'm gonna. That's not what that's not what this show in particular was about. Those things might come up a little bit later, but I really wanted this. I wanted this episode, this show, to be just an open forum where it wasn't necessarily we're going to argue and debate, but just share. And then later on, we can bring things up and talk about those things and stuff like that. But I wanted you guys just to hear our stories, where we come from, why we're here, and you can kind of see the commonality in our belief of this right here.
Yeah, this is something we really agree
Yeah.
on, that you have to be able to sit down and share opinions and beliefs and ideas.
Yes.
And you have to be able to defend those ideas. There's a little bit of clash and a little bit of argumentation, but you don't have to be a jerk about it.
Nope.
And that was my big epiphany some time ago, that I don't have to be a jerk about it, because I was hurting friends. I was hurting people.
Wow.
By, there's no God, there's no heaven, you're going to die. And,
Yeah.
and, really? But I had issues that I had to resolve
Yeah.
that were my problem. And when I finally worked on that on my own, but I worked on it and resolved it and came through on the other side.
Yeah.
And now I try to be a nice atheist.
Well,
So-
I'm glad to think that maybe I've been part of that.
You have been, Scott. You have been, because seeing the human side of Christianity, not seeing it as this monolithic evil pillar that wants to dominate our politics and our culture, and fill kids' heads with myths and fleece us for money, all of that stuff isn't necessarily true.
Mm-hmm. There are examples of it.
There are,
Yep.
But there are also a lot of Christians out there who help a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And they help a lot of people without regard to their religious belief. You don't have to be a Christian
Yep.
to be helped by Christians. And for some people, there are some people, I think, who need that moral compass in their life in order to be good people. Now, those people scare the crap out of me because, I don't need a moral compass to choose good, because
Yeah.
I understand from my culture, my society, what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah.
I don't need to be told what's right and wrong from a book necessarily. And I don't do what is right because I expect a reward. And I do not avoid what's wrong because I fear hell. I don't
Yeah.
need that. I can use
Gotcha.
my reason to say, hey, you know what? Let's not be a jerk to people. Let's have some empathy.
Yeah.
But there are people out there who need that. And in those cases, I'm kind of glad it's there.
Cool. Well, hey, This has been A Valid Answer with Scott and Marshall, a pastor and an atheist, sharing our stories today of how we got where we are, became who we are, and gosh, what we're going to become in the future. Because, hey, 40 is the new 20. It has been A Valid Answer. You can catch us on Kerncast, 5 o'clock every Sunday night. Find us on Facebook, either on Kerncast or on A Valid Answer on Facebook. And, of course, you can also email us at avalidanswer@gmail.com. And, hey, comment on the stories, comment on the videos. We'll be watching those and be answering those. But until next time,
we'll see you then.
See ya.